The frozen earth cracked beneath Fiona Harlow's feet as she stumbled through the snow-laden wilderness, her breath creating desperate clouds in the bitter December air, while behind her, somewhere in that white void, her uncle's voice still echoed with threats that made her blood run colder than the 1881 Wyoming winter ever could. She had been running for 2 days now, ever since she'd overheard Uncle Bernard discussing his plans to marry her off to Clayton Morse, a man 3 times her age with 2 dead wives already in the ground and a reputation that made even the hardest men in Cheyenne look away. At 20 years old, Fiona had already lost both parents to fever the previous spring, leaving her in Bernard's custody along with the substantial land her father had owned. Land that Bernard wanted to control, land that would become his entirely once she married his business partner and conveniently disappeared like those other unfortunate wives. The wind howled through the pine trees, sending cascades of snow down upon her dark hair. Her wool coat, hastily grabbed during her escape, was meant for town walks, not for this brutal journey through the mountains. Her fingers had gone numb hours ago, and her legs trembled with exhaustion. She had no idea where she was going, only that she needed to get far enough away that Bernard couldn't find her, couldn't drag her back to that fate worse than death. Fiona's foot caught on a hidden root beneath the snow, and she fell hard, her hands plunging into the icy whiteness. Tears froze on her cheeks as she tried to push herself up, but her arms wouldn't cooperate. The cold was winning. She had been so focused on escape that she hadn't properly planned for survival. Now, as darkness began to fall across the winter landscape, she realized she might have traded one death for another. Through the gathering twilight, she heard something. Hoofbeats. Her heart seized with terror, certain that Bernard had caught up to her, but then she heard a low voice speaking gently to a horse, a voice she didn't recognize. She tried to crawl behind a tree, but her body wouldn't move fast enough. "Easy now, Dakota," the voice said. And then there was silence except for the crunch of boots in snow. Fiona looked up to see a tall figure approaching, and as he came closer, she could make out a man in his mid-20s, wearing a heavy sheepskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat dusted with snow. His face was weathered but kind, with dark eyes that widened with concern when they landed on her. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. "Madam, what are you doing out here? You'll freeze to death. Please," Fiona managed through chattering teeth. "Don't take me back." "Please." The cowboy's brow furrowed with confusion and concern. "Take you back where?" "Madam, I'm not taking you anywhere except somewhere warm. Can you stand?" When she tried and failed, he didn't hesitate. He scooped her up in his arms as though she weighed nothing, and she was too cold and exhausted to protest. He carried her to his horse, a sturdy roan that stood patiently in the snow, and somehow managed to mount while holding her, settling her in front of him and wrapping his coat around them both. "There's a line cabin about 3 miles north," he said, his voice rumbling through his chest against her back. "I was heading there when I spotted your tracks. Hold on to me." Fiona gripped the saddle horn with her numb fingers as the horse began moving through the snow. The cowboy kept one arm wrapped firmly around her waist, holding her secure, and she could feel warmth beginning to seep back into her body from his. "I'm Vincent Quade," he said after a few minutes. "I work for the 3 Pines Ranch, checking the line camps and making sure everything's secure for winter." "What's your name?" "Fiona," she whispered. "Fiona Harlow." "Well, Miss Harlow, you're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you, I promise you that." Something in his voice made her believe him, and for the first time in days, she felt the knot of terror in her chest begin to loosen slightly. She didn't know this man, had no reason to trust him, but she had learned to read people during her 20 years, and Vincent Quade felt like safety itself. The ride to the cabin seemed to take both forever and no time at all. Fiona drifted in and out of awareness, the cold and exhaustion taking their toll. She was vaguely conscious of Vincent dismounting, of him carrying her again, of a door opening and blessed warmth washing over her. He set her down gently in a chair near a potbelly stove and immediately set about building up the fire. The cabin was small but well maintained, with a bunk against one wall, a table with 2 chairs, shelves stocked with supplies, and little else. It was a working cabin, meant for ranch hands to use during their circuits, not for comfort. "We need to get you out of those wet clothes," Vincent said, his tone purely practical. "You've got frostbite starting on your fingers. I've got spare clothes in my pack. They'll be too big, but they're dry." He turned his back and began rummaging through a leather pack, pulling out a flannel shirt and wool pants. "I'll step outside while you change. Call out when you're decent." Fiona's fingers fumbled with her buttons, barely able to make them work. The wet fabric clung to her skin, and she wanted to cry with frustration. After a few minutes, she had to call out, her voice small with embarrassment. "I can't manage the buttons." Vincent hesitated at the door, then came back inside, keeping his eyes carefully averted. "I'm going to help you with your coat and the top buttons of your dress, and then I'll turn around while you do the rest. I've got sisters, Miss Harlow. I know how to be a gentleman." His hands were gentle and efficient, treating her with the same careful respect she imagined he'd show his sisters. Once the coat and the most difficult buttons were undone, he turned his back, and Fiona managed to struggle out of the rest of her wet clothes and into his dry ones. The flannel shirt hung to her knees, and she had to roll the pants several times, but they were warm and soft and smelled like wood smoke and sage. "I'm decent," she said quietly. Vincent turned around and couldn't help the small smile that crossed his face at the sight of her swimming in his clothes, but his expression quickly grew serious again as he examined her hands. "This is going to hurt," he warned. "We need to warm them up slowly." He was right. As circulation returned to her fingers and toes, the pain was excruciating. Fiona bit her lip to keep from crying out, but tears streamed down her face. Vincent sat beside her, holding her hands carefully in his, massaging them gently and murmuring encouragement. "You're doing fine," he said. "Just breathe through it. It'll pass soon." "Why are you helping me?" Fiona asked through gritted teeth. "You don't know me." "Don't need to know you needed help," Vincent replied simply. "Out here, you don't leave people to die in the snow. Besides, you said something about not taking you back. That tells me you're running from something bad." Fiona looked into his dark eyes and saw genuine concern there, not the calculating coldness she'd seen in her uncle's gaze. Something inside her, some wall she'd built up during these terrible months since her parents' death, began to crack. "My uncle," she said quietly. "He wants to force me into marriage with his business partner, a man who has killed 2 wives already, though no one can prove it. My father left me land, and if I marry this man, my uncle will control everything. I overheard them planning it. Once the marriage took place, I wouldn't last 6 months. Vincent's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. "Where is this uncle of yours, Cheyenne? He'll be looking for me." "He'll have men searching." "Cheyenne's 60 miles southeast of here," Vincent said. "And the snow's been falling steady for 3 days. Your tracks are long gone. Even if he sends men out, they won't know which direction you headed." He paused, still carefully massaging warmth back into her hands. "But you can't go back. You know that, right?" "I know," Fiona whispered. "I have nowhere to go. No family except him, no friends who would stand against him. He's a powerful man in Cheyenne." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "There's a town called Sentinel Ridge, about 120 miles west of here, just over the Montana border. It's growing fast. Lots of people moving in. You could start fresh there and your uncle would have no reason to look for you that far out. I could take you there. That's over 100 miles, Fiona said, shocked, through winter mountains. Why would you do that for a stranger? Because it's the right thing to do, Vincent said simply. And because I've got 2 younger sisters back in Kansas, and I'd hope someone would do the same for them if they were in trouble. He met her eyes steadily. I won't lie to you, Miss Harlow. It'll be a hard journey, probably take us a week or more depending on the weather and the trails. But I know these mountains and I know how to survive in them. I can get you to safety. Fiona felt tears welling up again, but this time they weren't from pain. I don't even know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet, Vincent said with a slight smile. Wait until we're on the other side of this journey. For tonight, you need rest and food. I've got beans and salt pork and I can make a decent coffee. You take the bunk and I'll sleep on the floor by the fire. I couldn't take your bed, Fiona protested. You can and you will, Vincent said firmly but kindly. You've been through hell and you need proper rest. No arguments. They shared a simple meal as the wind howled outside the cabin walls. Vincent proved to be good company, telling stories about growing up on a farm in Kansas, about his family, about how he'd come west 3 years ago seeking adventure and found work as a ranch hand instead. He had an easy way of talking that made Fiona relax, made her feel almost normal again despite everything. What about you? Vincent asked as they finished eating. What was your life like before all this? Fiona stared into her coffee cup. Happy, she said softly. My parents were good people. My father owned a freight company, and my mother was a school teacher before they married. They taught me to read and write, to do figures. My father even taught me how to manage the business accounts. He said a woman should be able to stand on her own if she needed to. Her voice caught. They died within days of each other last spring. Fever swept through Cheyenne. After that, everything changed. Bernard was my father's brother, but they were never close. I should have known something was wrong when he suddenly became so interested in my welfare. Your father sounds like he was a good man, Vincent said gently. I'm sorry for your loss. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the wind outside. Finally, Vincent stood and began laying out bedrolls on the floor. We should get some sleep. I want to start early tomorrow, get as many miles behind us as we can while the weather holds. Fiona settled into the bunk, wrapped in warm blankets, and watched Vincent bank the fire and settle onto his makeshift bed. She hadn't felt safe in months, not since her parents died, but here in this tiny cabin with a stranger who'd shown her nothing but kindness, she finally did. She fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted in body and soul. She woke once in the night to find Vincent feeding the fire, keeping the cabin warm. He noticed her stirring and spoke softly. Just keeping the cold out. Go back to sleep. When morning came, pale light filtered through the cabin's single window and Fiona could hear Vincent moving quietly around the space. She sat up to find him packing supplies into saddlebags. Morning, he said with a smile. How do you feel? Better, Fiona admitted, flexing her fingers. They were sore but functional. Much better. Good. I'm packing supplies for the journey. We'll need to travel light but smart. I've got enough food for a week if we're careful, and I know where the line cabins are along the way. We'll have shelter most nights. Over a breakfast of fried salt pork and coffee, Vincent explained the route they'd take. We'll head northwest through the mountains, staying in the high country where the big ranches run their line camps. I know most of them, and I can claim we're traveling through on ranch business if anyone asks. Once we cross into Montana, we'll turn west toward Sentinel Ridge. The town's built up around a mining operation, but there's plenty of other work too. You said you can do figures and accounts. Yes, Fiona confirmed. Then you'll have no trouble finding work. The mining company always needs bookkeepers and the merchants too. It's not like Cheyenne, where everyone knows everyone's business. You can be whoever you want to be there. The idea sent a thrill through Fiona, the possibility of reinventing herself, of being free. Have you been there? Passed through twice, Vincent said. It's a good town, as frontier towns go, growing fast, which means opportunity. The kind of place where asking too many questions about someone's past is considered rude. They set out an hour later, Fiona riding behind Vincent on Dakota, her arms wrapped around his waist for stability. The sky was a brittle blue, the sun bright on the snow but offering little warmth. The cold bit through their layers, but it was manageable. Nothing like the desperate chill Fiona had endured during her flight from Cheyenne. As they rode, Vincent pointed out landmarks, taught her how to read the terrain, how to spot the signs of a trail even under snow. He talked about the mountains like he loved them, despite their harshness, and Fiona found herself listening as much to the sound of his voice as to his words. They stopped at midday to rest the horse and eat cold biscuits from Vincent's supplies. Fiona's legs ached from riding, muscles protesting this unfamiliar activity, but she didn't complain. This discomfort was nothing compared to what awaited her if Bernard found her. "You're doing well," Vincent said, offering her his canteen. "Most city folks would be complaining by now." "I'm not most city folks," Fiona said with a small smile, "and I'm motivated. That you are." Vincent looked at her with something like admiration. "It took courage to run like you did, you know. A lot of women would have accepted their fate." "I'd rather die free than live as Clayton Morse's wife," Fiona said flatly. "And it would have been death eventually. I saw how he looked at me, like I was property to be acquired and used." Vincent's expression darkened. "Men like that deserve a rope." He caught himself and shook his head. "Sorry, not my place to say." "No, you're right," Fiona said. "But men like Bernard and Clayton have money and influence. No one would have believed me if I'd accused them. They'd have called me hysterical, overly emotional. It's why I had to run." They reached another line cabin as dusk fell, this one even smaller than the first. Vincent got Fiona settled inside while he tended to Dakota, making sure the horse had shelter and feed in the small lean-to attached to the cabin. When he came back in, stamping snow from his boots, Fiona had already started a fire in the stove. "You're a quick learner," Vincent said approvingly. "I was watching you last night," Fiona admitted. "My father always said the best way to learn anything was to pay attention." They fell into an easy routine that evening. Vincent prepared their meal while Fiona organized their supplies, and they ate together as the fire warmed the small space. Conversation came easily now, the initial awkwardness of strangers fading into something more comfortable. "Tell me about your sisters," Fiona said. "You mentioned them before." Vincent's face softened. "Sarah and Margaret. Sarah's 22 now, probably married with babies by now. I haven't been home in over a year. Margaret would be 19. She was always the wild one, climbing trees and racing horses with the boys. Drove our mother to distraction." He smiled at the memory. "They're good girls, women now, I guess. It's strange to think about." "Do you miss them?" "Every day," Vincent admitted. "But I send money when I can and I write letters. Sarah writes back regularly. Margaret never was much for writing." He looked at Fiona. "What about you? Any siblings?" "No," Fiona said quietly. "It was just me. My mother had trouble with childbirth, nearly died having me. The doctor said she shouldn't have more children. My parents poured all their love into me. Sometimes I think that made losing them even harder." Vincent reached across the table and squeezed her hand briefly. "I'm sorry. That's a heavy burden to carry alone." That simple gesture of comfort meant more to Fiona than she could express. They sat together in companionable silence after that, and when it came time to sleep, Fiona again took the bunk while Vincent made his bed by the fire. The next 3 days followed a similar pattern. They woke early, traveled hard through the mountain trails, and stopped at line cabins when they could find them. On the fourth night, there was no cabin within reach, and Vincent had to make camp in the shelter of a rock outcropping, constructing a windbreak from pine branches and keeping a fire burning through the night. They huddled together for warmth, propriety taking a back seat to survival, and Fiona found she didn't mind the closeness. In fact, she felt safer pressed against Vincent's solid warmth than she had in her own bed in Cheyenne. "Tell me something," Vincent said as they lay watching the stars through the gaps in the pine branches. "If you could do anything, have any life you wanted, what would you choose?" Fiona thought about it. "I'd want a life where I made my own choices. Maybe run a business like my father did or teach like my mother. Something that was mine that I built with my own hands and mind." She paused. "That probably sounds foolish. Women don't really get those choices." "It doesn't sound foolish at all," Vincent said firmly. "My mother ran our farm's accounts, managed the household, and raised 3 children. My father always said she was the smartest person he knew. There's no reason you couldn't do the same, especially in a place like Sentinel Ridge where they need capable people more than they need to follow strict social rules." "Is that why you went west?" Fiona asked. "To escape the rules, partly," Vincent admitted. "Also because I was young and restless and wanted to see the mountains. I thought I'd strike it rich mining or become a legendary cowboy." He laughed softly. "Turns out being a ranch hand is hard work and poor pay, but I don't regret it. I've seen things most people never will. Been free in a way I never was back home." "I think I understand that," Fiona said. "Even running for my life, even cold and scared, there was something almost exhilarating about it, like I was taking control for the first time." "That's because you were," Vincent said. "You chose freedom over security. That takes strength." They fell silent, and eventually Fiona drifted off to sleep, lulled by the crackling fire and Vincent's steady breathing beside her. On the 5th day, they crossed into Montana territory. Vincent pointed out the invisible boundary with satisfaction. "Your uncle has no jurisdiction here, not that he had much authority to chase you anyway. You're truly free now, Miss Harlow." "Fiona," she said. "Please just call me Fiona. After everything, I think we're past formalities." Vincent smiled, and Fiona noticed how it transformed his serious face, made him look younger and lighter. "All right, Fiona, and you should call me Vincent or Vince if you prefer." "Vincent suits you better," Fiona said. "It's a strong name." They made good time that day, the weather holding clear and cold. That night they reached a larger cabin, this one belonging to a ranch Vincent had worked for the previous year. There was even a separate room with a real bed, which Vincent insisted Fiona take while he slept in the main room. As they shared their evening meal, Vincent became more serious. "We're about 2 days from Sentinel Ridge now, maybe 3 if the weather turns. I've been thinking about what happens when we get there." Fiona's stomach tightened. She'd been trying not to think about that, about the moment when Vincent would leave her and continue on with his life. "What about it? You'll need money to get established, find lodging, buy proper clothes. I don't have much, but I've got about $40 saved. It's yours." "I couldn't possibly take your savings," Fiona protested. "You can and you will," Vincent said, echoing his words from that first night. "You'll pay me back someday when you're running your own business empire. Consider it an investment." Fiona felt tears prickling her eyes. "Why are you doing all this? Really?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. When he looked up, his eyes were intense. "At first, it was just the right thing to do. You needed help and I was there to give it. But somewhere along this journey, things changed. You're brave and smart and determined, and talking with you has been the best part of my days. I guess I want to help you because I've come to care about what happens to you." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Fiona's heart was racing. "I care about what happens to you too," she said softly. "These past days with you have been the happiest I've been since my parents died. You make me feel safe and valued and seen. I don't want this journey to end." "Neither do I," Vincent admitted. "But you need to get to Sentinel Ridge, start your new life." "What if you stayed?" Fiona asked, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "In Sentinel Ridge, I mean. What if you didn't go back to the ranch?" Vincent looked startled. "I've got obligations, a job." "You said yourself the pay is poor," Fiona pressed. "Sentinel Ridge is a growing town. There would be opportunities there for you too. We could both start fresh." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "Together." "Fiona, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying I don't want to say goodbye to you," Fiona said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know it's fast and probably foolish, but I've never felt as comfortable with anyone as I do with you. You've shown me more kindness and respect in 5 days than Bernard showed me in months. You listen when I talk. You treat me like an equal. I don't want to lose that." Vincent stood and crossed to her side of the table, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. "I've been trying not to say anything because I didn't want to take advantage, didn't want you to feel obligated to me because I helped you. But the truth is, I've been falling for you since that second night when you told me about your parents, and I saw how strong you really are. You're not like any woman I've ever met." "Is that a good thing?" Fiona asked, her heart soaring. "It's the best thing," Vincent said, and then he kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and perfect, nothing like the forced, unwelcome attention Bernard's associates had tried to press on her. This was a kiss of equals, of two people choosing each other freely. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "So we're doing this?" Vincent asked. "Starting a life together in Sentinel Ridge, if you want to," Fiona said. "I want to," Vincent confirmed. "God help me. I know it's crazy and fast, but I want to." They talked long into the night, making plans, dreaming about possibilities. Vincent would find work in Sentinel Ridge, maybe as a lawman or a ranch foreman. Fiona would look for work keeping books until she saved enough to maybe start her own business. They'd find a small house, build a life together. "We should get married," Vincent said as the fire burned low. "Not because we have to, but because I want the world to know you're choosing to be with me." "I want to do this right, Fiona." "I want that too," Fiona agreed, "but I want a little time first just to be sure we're making the right choice. Not because I doubt my feelings, but because I want us both to be certain." "That's wise," Vincent said. "We'll court properly once we reach Sentinel Ridge. I'll find respectable lodging for you, come calling with flowers, take you to dinner. The whole proper courtship." "I'd like that," Fiona said, smiling. "Though I'm not sure anything could be more romantic than being rescued from a blizzard and carried to safety." The next 2 days of travel were different, charged with a new awareness between them. They held hands when they walked, and Vincent kept his arm around Fiona when they rode. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories, hopes, and dreams. On the 7th day, they crested a ridge and saw Sentinel Ridge spread out in the valley below, smoke rising from countless chimneys, the sounds of industry and life rising up to meet them. "There it is," Vincent said. "Your new home. Our new home." They descended into the town as afternoon shadows grew long. Sentinel Ridge was everything Vincent had described and more. The main street bustled with activity, people of all descriptions going about their business. There were storefront businesses, a bank, a church, several saloons, and a large building that bore a sign reading Sentinel Mining Company. Vincent made inquiries and found a respectable boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. The woman looked them over shrewdly when Vincent explained that Fiona was newly arrived from the East and needed lodging while she looked for work. "And what's your relationship to this young lady?" Mrs. Patterson asked bluntly. "I'm courting her," Vincent said firmly. "With marriage in mind, once we've had proper time to be sure of our feelings." Mrs. Patterson's stern expression softened slightly. "At least you're honest about it. I've got a room available, Miss Harlow, $3 a week, including meals. No male visitors above the first floor, and I expect respectable behavior." "That sounds perfect," Fiona said. Vincent paid for 2 weeks in advance from his savings, despite Fiona's protests. "Consider it a courting gift," he said with a smile. He left Fiona to settle in and went to inquire about work. By evening, he returned to the boarding house with good news. The sheriff was looking for a deputy, and Vincent's experience working ranch security and his references from the Three Pines Ranch had secured him the position. "It pays $60 a month," Vincent said, his eyes shining with excitement as they sat in the boarding house parlor under Mrs. Patterson's watchful eye. "That's more than I made in 3 months at the ranch. I can get a room at the boarding house down the street, start tomorrow." "That's wonderful," Fiona said, genuinely happy for him. Over the next week, they fell into a pattern. Vincent worked long days as deputy, learning the town and establishing himself. Fiona secured a position keeping books for the general store, her neat handwriting and quick mind with numbers impressing the owner immediately. In the evenings, Vincent would call on her at the boarding house, and they'd sit in the parlor or take walks through town, always properly chaperoned, building their relationship on a foundation of friendship and respect. The other boarders, mostly single women who worked as teachers or seamstresses, adopted Fiona immediately, sharing gossip and advice. None of them asked too many questions about her past, accepting her story that she'd come west after losing her family. It was a common enough tale in these frontier towns. 2 months after arriving in Sentinel Ridge on a bright February afternoon, Vincent asked Fiona to take a walk with him. He led her to a small church on the edge of town, where the minister was tending the grounds. "Reverend Hayes," Vincent said, "this is Miss Fiona Harlow. Fiona, I've been talking with the Reverend about performing a wedding." Fiona's heart skipped. "Have you now?" "I have," Vincent said, taking her hands. "I know we said we'd take our time, and we have. 2 months of proper courting, of getting to know each other in a real town with real lives. And every single day has confirmed what I knew in that cabin in the mountains. I love you, Fiona Harlow. I want to marry you, build a life with you, have children with you if we're blessed, and grow old with you. Will you marry me?" Fiona felt tears streaming down her face, but these were happy tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Vincent, I'll marry you. I love you too." They were married a week later in that same small church, with Mrs. Patterson and several of the boarding house ladies in attendance, along with Vincent's fellow lawmen and some of the townspeople who'd befriended them. Fiona wore a simple blue dress that she'd purchased with her first wages, and Vincent wore his best suit. They exchanged vows before Reverend Hayes, promising to love and honor each other for all their days. The wedding supper was held at the town's best restaurant, paid for by the sheriff who'd taken a liking to his new deputy. As Fiona and Vincent cut their cake, surrounded by their new friends and neighbors, Fiona felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she was meant to be, with this man who'd saved her life and won her heart. They rented a small house on the outskirts of town, nothing fancy but theirs, and began building their life together. Vincent proved to be a natural lawman, respected by the townspeople for his fairness and integrity. Fiona continued working at the general store, but she also began helping other businesses with their accounts, building a reputation as someone reliable and skilled with numbers. Spring came, melting the snow and bringing wildflowers to the mountain meadows. One evening in May, as they sat on their small porch watching the sunset, Fiona told Vincent she was expecting a child. The joy on his face was everything she could have hoped for. "A baby," he breathed. "We're going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Fiona asked, though his expression left no doubt. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Vincent said, pulling her close. "You've given me everything, Fiona. A home, a purpose, and now a family. I'm the luckiest man alive." Their son was born in December, exactly 1 year after that desperate night when Vincent had found Fiona freezing in the snow. They named him Thomas, after Fiona's father, and he was perfect, with his mother's dark hair and his father's steady eyes. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Vincent rose through the ranks, eventually becoming sheriff when the old sheriff retired. Fiona established her own bookkeeping business, working from home so she could care for Thomas. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Sarah, named after Vincent's sister. Then came another son, James, and finally another daughter, Eleanor. Through it all, they remained deeply in love, that initial connection forged in desperate circumstances growing into something solid and enduring. They built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, became pillars of the community, and watched Sentinel Ridge grow from a rough frontier town into a proper city. On their 10th anniversary, Vincent surprised Fiona with a trip back to the line cabin where he'd first brought her to safety. They left the children with Mrs. Patterson, who'd become like a grandmother to them, and rode up into the mountains. The cabin was still there, still maintained by the Three Pines Ranch for their line riders. "Remember this?" Vincent asked as they stood in the doorway. "How could I forget?" Fiona said. "This is where you saved my life." "No," Vincent said, pulling her close. "This is where we saved each other. You gave my life meaning, Fiona. Before you, I was just drifting, working for wages, no real purpose. You gave me a reason to put down roots, to build something lasting." "You did the same for me," Fiona said. "I was running from death, but you showed me how to run toward life instead." They spent the night in that cabin, talking and reminiscing, watching the stars through the same window that had let in the pale winter light 10 years before. In the morning, they rode back to Sentinel Ridge, back to their children and their life, both grateful beyond measure for that winter day when their paths had crossed. Years passed. Their children grew strong and healthy. Thomas became a lawyer, Sarah a teacher like her grandmother. James took over his father's position as sheriff, and Eleanor married a doctor and opened a clinic. Fiona's bookkeeping business expanded until she was managing accounts for half the businesses in town, and Vincent served as sheriff until he was 60, respected and admired by all who knew him. Through it all, through the joys and sorrows, the triumphs and challenges, Vincent and Fiona remained devoted to each other. They sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the mountains where their love story had begun. They attended their children's weddings, welcomed grandchildren, and built a legacy of love and service in the community they'd made their own. When Bernard Harlow died in Cheyenne in 1895, 14 years after Fiona's escape, the notice appeared in the newspaper. Fiona read it without emotion, that part of her life so far in the past it seemed like someone else's story. Vincent found her sitting on the porch, the newspaper in her lap. "You all right?" he asked, settling beside her. "More than all right," Fiona said. "I was just thinking about how different my life would have been if you hadn't found me that night. If I'd frozen in that snow, or if Bernard had caught me, or if you'd been anyone other than exactly who you are." "Fate," Vincent said simply. "Love," Fiona corrected. "Fate brought us together, but love is what kept us together. Love and choice. We chose each other then, and we've kept choosing each other every day since." "And I'd make the same choice every time," Vincent said, kissing her temple. They sat together as the sun set over the mountains, two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built the best life. Around them, their town bustled with life, their children and grandchildren thriving, their love story woven into the very fabric of Sentinel Ridge. On their 40th anniversary in 1922, the town threw them a celebration. Nearly everyone in Sentinel Ridge attended, 3 generations of people whose lives had been touched by the sheriff and his wife. Thomas gave a speech about his parents' dedication to each other and their community. Sarah presented them with a photo album filled with pictures spanning 4 decades. James deputized his father for the evening, giving him back his old badge. Alina brought their newest great-grandchild, barely 3 months old, for them to hold. As Fiona looked around the crowded town hall, at all these people they'd come to love, at the man beside her who'd been her rock and partner through it all, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She'd run from death that winter night in 1881, but she'd run straight into life, into love, into everything she'd never known she wanted. Vincent must have sensed her emotion because he squeezed her hand. "What are you thinking?" "That I'd do it all again," Fiona said. "Every cold, terrifying moment of that run through the snow, if it meant ending up right here, right now with you." "Me too," Vincent said. "Every single moment." They danced that night, moving slowly to music played by local musicians, surrounded by the community they'd helped build and the family they'd created together. And if anyone noticed that the elderly couple held each other a little tighter, looked at each other with a little more intensity, they understood. Everyone in Sentinel Ridge knew the story of how the sheriff and his wife had met, how he'd rescued her from a winter storm and led her to safety miles away from danger. It was a town legend, told to children and newcomers alike, but what made it more than just a legend was that it was real. The love between Vincent and Fiona Quade was as solid and enduring as the mountains themselves, built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the choice they'd made 40 years ago to face the future together. Vincent passed peacefully in his sleep in 1925 at the age of 70, with Fiona holding his hand and their children gathered around. Fiona followed him less than a year later, and they were buried side by side in the Sentinel Ridge Cemetery, under a headstone that read, "Together Forever." Their love story didn't end with their deaths. It lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the town they'd helped build, in the lives they'd touched. And sometimes, on cold winter nights, old-timers in Sentinel Ridge would tell the story of the cowboy and the woman he'd saved from a winter storm, how they'd fallen in love during a dangerous journey through the mountains, and how they'd built a life together that became the foundation of the town itself. It was a story of courage and kindness, of 2 people who'd found each other in the darkness and created light. It was a love story for the ages, proof that sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the very best, and that true love, when built on a foundation of respect and choice, can endure anything. And so the legacy of Vincent and Fiona Quade lived on, a testament to the power of love, the importance of compassion, and the truth that sometimes, when you're running from danger, you might just run straight into destiny.